3 creepy true blackout horror stories. Let's go. It doesn't make any sense, but be cool. How about we just do Super Saiyan Raditz at first? Just to start
There was
off.
a pretty big thunderstorm going on this night. Nothing dangerous or anything, but enough to keep everyone inside for the rest of the day. I'm one of those people that enjoy rainy nights,
I do
or
too.
even storms. Something about it just makes me feel cozy and relaxed. Whenever there was a night like this, I'd always spend the night on the couch watching TV and listening to the rain. Luckily, I didn't have work the next day, and although it was already 8 p.m., I decided to make a hot cup of coffee and stay up as late as I could to enjoy the cozy night. I sat down and turned on a movie. It was only 20 minutes into the movie when my phone started ringing.
Real quick, nothing beats a thunderstorm. You don't have to work the next day. You got the AC on maybe 70 degrees. You got your favorite meal in front of you. You watching Netflix and you just chilling. That's like a great night, man. Great night.
I picked it up and looked at the number, but didn't recognize it. However, the area code was from this city. I answered just in case.
Right, JC. In chat, I gotta love you and leave you. Got a towel, clean yourselves up. What the? Are you leaving, Tels?
Always worried it might be something important, or someone I knew, but just didn't have their number saved.
Hello?
No one said anything.
Can I help you? Hello?
Still, no one spoke. Oddly, I could tell it wasn't a dead line though, like I could hear background noise.
All you hear is
It was messy, and after thinking about it for a couple seconds, it kinda sounded like the storm or rain outside, so I knew someone was there, but they just weren't talking. Feeling weird, I hung
all right, Tels, take care, bro. Good seeing you, bro.
up. I couldn't really think of any reason someone would call and say nothing. I figured it had to be a mistake or a scam of some kind, even though it wasn't the typical robot voice or whatever. I tossed my phone back on the end table and continued watching TV. I got pretty well into the movie, probably an hour through, when in just a matter of seconds, the storm outside got increasingly louder, like it really picked up.
First of all, why aren't your blinds closed? That's number one. People are looking up all in your house.
Thunder, lightning, and heavy rain. Then the TV and lights flickered. They quickly turned off, then right back on in a split second. I paused the movie and looked around, not sure what was happening. Then, not even 30 seconds later, the power went out.
Oh shit.
Suddenly, the entire house was silent, and the storm was twice as loud. Rain was flooding onto the roof and against the windows, and there was heavy, non-stop thunder for what felt like 5 whole minutes. The only light I had was a small candle that I basically never used. Obviously, I had my phone too, but I didn't want to waste its battery, especially since I didn't know how long this would last for. I lit the candle, then figured I'd just double-check the breaker box downstairs. I went down and saw the switch was loose. I flipped it back and forth, but it was completely dead. I went back upstairs and really had nothing to do but watch the storm out the window. I also noticed all the other houses down the entire street were dark as well.
Did you make sure your doors are locked? Check the windows? You close your blinds? Just chill. In my opinion, I'd probably go to sleep at that point. I'm going to sleep.
So it looked like it was a pretty bad power outage. My phone was running off of 5G data, so I checked if there was any information on the status, but there was nothing. I was probably standing there by the window for about 15 minutes, watching and listening to the storm, when, completely out of nowhere, I heard something from outside the house. I immediately recognized the sound. It was the gate to my backyard, swinging open. That gate didn't have any sort of lock on it, but it never just swings open like that. Really, not having any ideas what it could have been, I walked to the back of the house and looked out the back door. Even through the darkness, and the storm and everything, I could see the shadow of a man. They had clearly just come from the side the gate was on,
Oh, hell
but he
no.
was just standing in the rain in the middle of the backyard. Because I could really only see his outline, he just looked like a dark figure. I couldn't tell where he was looking. Like,
Get the shotty, lock the doors. I mean, call the cops. Hey, there's a shadowy figure out here. He's standing in my backyard. Can you come over here and check it out, please? All right, you'll be over in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Okay, cool. All right, click. That's all you gotta do. That's all you gotta do, man.
was he looking toward the house at me, or was he facing away from the house? I didn't know what he was doing out there, but it gave me a bad feeling. I know I could have opened the door and yelled at him to leave my property, but I felt kinda nervous.
Why would you do
I
that?
mean, if he was crazy enough to just be walking around outside in the middle of a massive storm like this, it wouldn't be far off to assume that he had a gun or something. I thought it was best to not confront them, so I just stayed by the door and watched him.
Good idea.
They didn't move for an entire minute, until his arm slowly lifted up from his pocket and he put his hand by his head. I didn't know what he was doing, but I could see a small glowing light in his hand, and just when I realized what it was, my phone began ringing in the other room. It didn't take me all but 2 seconds to understand what was going on. This random guy outside my house was calling me. That's why I could hear the rain on the other end of the phone earlier when he wasn't saying anything. But that was an hour ago. Had he been out in the storm, standing outside my home the whole time? Freaking out, I hurried into the living room
Why does he
and
have your
grabbed my
number?
phone, confirming it was the same number. Then, without answering it, I went back to the door. The man was gone.
Knew it.
This freaked me out.
Knew it.
Why didn't I just stay by the door and keep an eye on him? I felt stupid. I didn't like standing by the door though, knowing he might be somewhere out there watching me, while I couldn't see him. I went back to the living room. I thought about calling the cops, but I really didn't know what to say. Like, someone called me twice and was outside my home, but I had no proof it was the same person, or that they were doing anything wrong aside from being in my backyard.
You could literally say, hey, I saw somebody out there in my backyard. He called my phone, and just come out here and check it out. Just check it out. That's all you gotta do. That's all you gotta do.
Not too long later, my phone rang again.
Oh, shit.
It made me jump,
What's up,
even
gamer?
though I was half expecting it. That's how freaked out I was. I declined the call, and only seconds later, a loud knock came from the front door. They called again, while continuing to knock on the door. These were heavy hits, too, shaking the walls of the house.
Oh, hell no.
I turned my phone on silent, and embarrassingly, I kind of froze up and did nothing. I know
So you,
how
you
dumb
bang on my door again, I'm gonna put 5 hot ones in your chest.
that sounds, but I've never been in a situation like that before, and when you add in the storm and the power outage, it just made it all worse. I think it took 30 seconds, and for them to begin hitting the door even more aggressively, before I finally snapped out of it and called the police. My hands were shaking as I held the phone. They said an officer was heading over right away, and they were about 4 minutes from me. I continued to
And guess what? By the time the cops show up, he's gonna be gone. Always happens.
inform them of what I knew, and the man didn't let off hitting the door. This went on for the entire time that I was waiting for the cop to arrive. Finally, the operator said that they were on my street. A few moments later, I heard someone yelling.
So many places in the U.S. you do this and you are risking your life. Absolutely. I mean, it could, and you know what's wild? It could be like harmless as hell too. Like, I mean, in this situation, definitely not harmless. I mean, this is definitely like a different situation. But I saw a news article of like this girl just selling chocolate chip cookies, and the guy wasn't home, but I think he got on his Ring camera and was like being super rude, disrespectful, and racist to this chick. And it was crazy because it was like, she's just selling cookies, man. So if you got a guy at night knocking loud as fuck on your door when it's storming and it's like, dude, you have a death wish. You have a death wish.
I hurried up to the window and just caught sight of the officer chasing him. They ran off into the storm, and I couldn't see
Yeah.
anything after that.
Oh yeah, at this point I'm definitely locked and loaded. Oh, you bust through this door, you gonna see Jesus.
I think I waited 2 minutes before the officer came back empty-handed. The guy was able to get away.
Really?
I was actually impressed by how much the police department tried to help me, though. They did a pretty thorough investigation and seemed to take it seriously, probably because they actually saw and chased the guy.
Oh wow.
But the only real lead was the phone number, and it ended up being a dead end. I tried coming up with anyone who would be out to get me like this, but I had no idea. The case kind of died out, and since then, I've never gotten any calls from that number or seen anything else.
Sir, I just wanted to contact you because of your car's extended warranty. I tried to reach you. I knocked on your door several times. You wouldn't answer the door.
I got this car recently, and look how much I was paying for insurance before. I used this.
Ad. I wonder if these stories are actually real. It makes me wonder.
I don't remember exactly what year it was that this happened, but I've never really been able to shake the horror I felt that night.
Okay.
It's one of those things you assume would never happen to you, or that only happens in the movies. But being that naive only makes it 100 times more terrifying if you are unfortunate enough to experience something similar. I was young at the time, being in middle school, kind of at that age where I was starting to feel like I was growing up a bit. You know, feeling more like a man, I guess. Which is silly to think about looking back.
Coming of age.
Anyway, it was summer, so most of my days were spent hanging out with my friends, either outside or gaming inside.
Cool.
This weekend was special, though. My parents were taking a short road trip to a city 8 hours away to relive their honeymoon, or something like that. I didn't care too much about the details, because all I could think about was how excited I was to have the house to myself and invite my friends to sleep over with no rules to follow or anything. They left early Saturday morning, so when I woke up, they were already gone. I immediately texted my best friend, Finn. The only issue was that his parents definitely wouldn't let him over if they knew that there were no adults in the house. But with a little bit of lying, Finn was allowed to come over. Now, he wasn't going to be at my place until later in the day, like 6-ish, but being excited, I opened up the front windows so I could see when he got here later. However, when I did, I quickly noticed a man outside. The only reason I even cared was because he was strangely close to the house, like past the sidewalk and kind of near the garage.
Ooh.
He had a very distinct look to him. Longish dark hair, patchy beard, and fairly tall and skinny. It made me feel uneasy, so I moved away from the window, not wanting to get spotted looking at him. A few minutes later, I quickly checked again, and he was gone. I didn't think it was anything worth mentioning. The rest of that day was chill. I was mostly in my room, just playing on my Xbox, until 6 when Finn finally made it. We grabbed some snacks from the kitchen, then went upstairs and pretty much locked ourselves in my room and played video games for 5 hours straight.
Wow.
It was about...
Sidebar, this is a great setup. I love this setup. I wish I had this setup. I'm jealous.
11:30, and of course we were still playing Xbox when Finn left the room to go to the bathroom. Only 30 seconds later, though, he came back and asked if I heard that.
Oh.
I asked what, not having heard anything. But before Finn could answer, the whole house suddenly went dark.
Uh-oh.
The TV, Xbox, lights, everything just shut off.
Oh gosh.
I couldn't even see Finn standing in the doorway 5 feet from me. I combed the floor with my hands, trying to feel around for my phone, picking it up and turning on the flashlight. Both me and Finn were quiet for a second. I think just confused why the power had shut off so suddenly, but also I was listening for what sound Finn said he heard just a few moments before the blackout. Eventually, after hearing nothing and the power not coming back on, I asked again what he heard, but Finn said he wasn't really sure. Maybe like a
This wouldn't be a disadvantage for me in my house. At least my house or my parents' house. This would not be like, I know this house, like this apartment, but imagine if this happened in my parents' home. I know that house like the back of my hand. You fucking try to like get an advantage with like turning the lights out, bro. I still have home field advantage. If anything, it's gonna be a disadvantage for you.
thump or a footstep on the floor below us. With the power shutting off, though, we assumed it was
You game on PC, JC? You checked out the Steam sale? No, I haven't. I didn't realize there was a Steam sale going on.
probably just something to do with that.
But I do game
But
on
we
PC.
still didn't know why it shut off. And being younger and alone in the house, it was still a little unsettling.
Exactly.
Knowing we kind of had to figure out what was going on, we went out into the hallway and down to the first floor. Once we left the room, we noticed we could hear the wind outside. It wasn't anything out of the usual, but enough to maybe consider that it could have caused a problem. Maybe it was us just grasping for something to blame, though.
Maybe somebody broke
Neither
in.
of us really knew what to do in this situation. Like, I knew there was an electrical box in the basement that could somehow test or turn the power back on, but I didn't know any specifics, and I was kind of nervous to try anything. Finn thought he might be able to figure it out, though, so I showed him to the basement. Oddly, the door was already open.
Oh shit.
Rarely does anyone go down there because it was unfinished, and nothing was there but some storage and random old, unused stuff. However, with my parents going on a trip, I thought maybe they might have gone down to grab some suitcases or something. The basement door was kind of toward the back of the house, so I hadn't been over there that whole day. This just made the whole thing a bit more unsettling than it already was. We still had our phone flashlights on, so Finn led the way as we walked down the creaky wooden stairs and into the basement. It wasn't very big, kind of like a wide corridor with concrete walls and a few boxes and loose items.
At least grab a weapon. At the very least, get a kitchen knife or something. If you don't have a gun, get a kitchen knife or a hammer. And one of you guys just coordinate, and you could probably neutralize the threat. I mean, that's it. That is if that person doesn't have a gun. You know what I mean?
Stacked up along the wall. Obviously, it was extremely dark. Anything that wasn't directly in front of our flashlights was completely pitch black.
Yikes.
We went over to the electrical box. The panel that covered it was already partially opened. Finn looked around at it, but I think now that he was down here, he was also just as nervous as I was about trying anything.
I bet.
The main, larger switch was the only one that was flipped to the opposite side from all the rest, though. Of course, we didn't know what this meant, but after a bit of hesitation, he flipped it over. Immediately, there were a bunch of faint beeping sounds and random startup noises from all the appliances on the floor above us. The basement was still completely dark, though, as we never even tried turning the lights on before going down there. There was only a single sliver of light shining down the staircase from the first floor. We started walking back down the corridor to get to the stairs, but just before we got there, a sudden shuffling sound came from the other side of the basement.
Oh Lord.
Both of us stopped moving, and I shined my light in that direction.
Oh Lord.
In the dark, someone was standing there.
Oh.
I could see their shape outlined in the light, and I immediately recognized their tall, skinny appearance and long, dark hair. He was standing sort of behind some boxes, which casted a shadow over his face, so I couldn't tell if we were making eye contact or not, or if he was sure that we saw him.
Oh, we see
I
your
turned
ass.
and booked it up the stairs. Finn followed close behind. I slammed the door behind us, and we just ran right out the front door.
Ooh.
Both of us were understandably freaking out. We ran across the street, and I started a call with 911. It was pretty clear as we stood there, and all the other houses' lights were on, that the man in the basement had shut off the power.
Right.
While on the phone, getting updates from the operator, we saw a figure move past one of the downstairs windows. Then, 15 seconds later, they moved past an upstairs window. I think it was the one to my parents' room that they were walking around in. But for the next couple minutes, we saw nothing else before police arrived. They went in, and nobody was there.
Of course.
He'd already left out one of the back windows. Of course, my parents were called, and there were a ton of questions, but ultimately, nothing came of it. There's so many horrifying things to think about when it comes to what happened that night, or could have happened, like how long that man had been watching the house for, or watching my family for. What exactly was he trying to do by breaking in and shutting off the power, then staying hidden in the basement?
I mean, what do you think he might have been trying to do? If he's doing all that, probably take you out and steal all your stuff. Just a guess, you know what I mean?
Thankfully, my parents were smart enough to move us out of that house soon after. Hopefully, we never have any more encounters with that man again.
Imagine he tracks them where he just moved to. These aren't really that scary, I will say, though. They're a little predictable.
This is your brain when you're struggling to focus.
Just saying.
And this is your brain when you're in the zone.
These are really predictable stories. Cabin in the woods.
Every couple of months, I visit my off-grid cabin in the wilderness of Montana. It's very isolated, which was perfect, and the whole reason I bought the place.
Very isolated.
It's great for short vacations, to get away from everyone and just enjoy my time alone in the forests.
The problem with being in an isolated cabin in Montana is that, well, if shit happens, then how are you going to find any help? You know, how can you even call for help? I mean, help's not gonna get to you in probably, like, you know, God knows how long, you know? So, I don't know.
This was during fall. I had a 5-day weekend off from work and chose to drive 3 hours north to my cabin, kind of on a whim. Since I didn't prepare much for it, the drive was a little bit exhausting as I hadn't gotten any extra sleep beforehand. I got to the cabin at
Rookie
about
move.
7 p.m. The long, isolated dirt road through the forest that led to the cabin was a little hard to navigate with the sun down. But when I got to the front, I parked and unloaded my bag, quickly tossing it inside, then going around back to start up the generator.
Shit.
This whole cabin ran off of a gas generator, so the lights, outlets, and even the electric stove top
Sexy grandma. I've been to Montana. Western Montana is beautiful, but the state is very empty. Ooh.
was powered by one small generator.
That's
I never used
interesting
much
and a
power
little
anyway, so
concerning.
it was always enough for me. I filled up the gas, cranked it up, and went inside, starting the wood stove and warming up. Up here in northern Montana, it gets pretty cold in fall. I think at night where my cabin was, it often
Montana has grizzly bears, right? Yeah, I'm not going.
dipped below 25 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the fall season. Winters are brutal, so I don't even try going to the cabin. Anyway, I only stayed up for an hour or so.
Honestly, it's
before
probably
going to
nice
bed.
to visit there.
The next day, I spent cleaning, mostly dusting everything off and resealing some of the cracks in the cabin walls. Randomly, in the middle of the day though, I noticed an old truck coming down the dirt trail to the cabin.
Oh boy.
I could see them driving between the trees, but once they got closer, they stopped. They sat there for maybe 5 minutes, then turned around and left.
Oh boy.
I really didn't think too much about it, assuming they'd somehow made the wrong turn and likely had a cabin of their own
He's
somewhere
going back to
nearby.
get the boys.
At night, I think around 10, I felt like enjoying a bit of nature and started up a campfire on the front porch. This would give the wood stove more time to heat up the cabin as well before I'd go to bed. I grabbed some old fire starters I'd left behind from months ago and headed to the porch. I had this little fire pit out there.
Is
so I
he
tossed
there by himself? I don't know if I'd be here by myself. chat. Just saying. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's never really had any issues doing this, but I don't know.
Tossed a couple logs in it and lit it up. It was always so nice the first couple nights being at the cabin and just listening to the forest and calm, quiet nature sounds. However, I was only sitting outside for maybe 5 to 10 minutes before the outdoor porch light all of a sudden turned off. I looked back, seeing all the lights in the cabin were off as well.
My bad, Miguel.
There was only the dim orange glow coming from the wood stove. It was then I realized the noisy generator wasn't being, well, noisy. It wasn't running anymore. Annoyed, I got up and walked around back.
Oh, man.
Sure enough, it was off. I cranked it a few times, trying to get it back on, but after 10 good tries at it, I gave up and kicked it out of frustration. I thought it was just an old generator doing what old generators do best, which is to break down and not work properly.
I don't recommend driving across Wyoming. Talk about empty. Ooh.
But after coming to my senses and checking the gas, it was empty. What the hell? I had just filled it up with a whole canister when I got to the cabin last night. There was almost no chance it ran through it that quickly.
Right.
I checked around the grass for any signs of a leak or something, but there wasn't. I was really confused. I honestly didn't know how it was possible, but I didn't have any extra. So I was going to be without power until at least tomorrow morning, when I could drive into town and get more fuel. Despite the inconvenience, I knew it really wasn't too big of a deal. I had the wood stove to heat the place, and was going to bed soon anyway, so I didn't really need any lights or anything. I went back to the porch and sat down, trying to get calm and relaxed again, to at least enjoy the rest of my night. But it only took me a few seconds to notice something out in the woods.
Oh, shit.
A person, or at least something that resembled a person, sort of among all the trees, off to the right of the dirt trail. I leaned forward, trying to get a better look, but whatever I was seeing was so dark and still that I was unsure if it was a person or just a weird-looking shape, like a bush or something.
You know how you can fix that problem if you're not sure? Just like cock your shotgun. Then you'll know. Then you'll know. Just cock it. Just one good time. Let them see you cock it. And like, oh, whoa, wait. I'm sorry, sir. I'm leaving.
After a few minutes, I kind of gave up on staring at it, since it wasn't moving at all, and went back to just resting and
Bet you
listening
he'll
to the
move
quiet
to that
night.
if you did that.
But when I happened to glance back at the forest a minute later, I couldn't find it.
Oh my
I
gosh.
looked around for several more minutes, thinking I must have just lost track of exactly where it was, but still couldn't see it anywhere.
He's got cabin fever.
Not gonna lie, that kind of put me on edge. I wouldn't consider myself a paranoid person, but that might have been one of the most unnerving things I'd experienced in a while. Obviously, if it was just a bush or whatever, it should still be right where I last saw it.
No, dude.
It gave me goosebumps thinking about it.
It's not just a bush.
I didn't take my eyes off the forest for the next 30 minutes. The quiet ambiance that filled the forest around the cabin now felt eerie. I sensed that I wasn't alone, or that I was being watched. That, combined with the generator cutting out, something wasn't right. Then, I guess it probably would have been nearly 12 a.m. when I heard a sudden sound to my left,
Ooh.
like a stick falling on the ground. Maybe from a tree, or maybe something else. I stared out into the dark in that direction, just kind of waiting to see if something moved. But after 30 seconds, I looked back toward the front of the cabin. My heart almost stopped.
What happened?
That figure was back, standing in the same spot as before.
Ooh.
Then I noticed another, and another.
See? What did I say? He went back to go get the boys. He's like, hey man, there's this guy here in this cabin. He might have some good stuff. Let's go rob him. But the thing about doing something like this is why don't you have a weapon? Like, arm yourself. You're out there and, like, you know, isolated from anybody else. At least try to protect yourself, you know? I'm not even a really big gun person, but I mean, all I know is that I think you should really protect yourself. You know, become prepared. You just never know what could go down. Just never know. Never know. But if it does go down, you'll be ready. So
There were maybe a dozen figures standing out between the trees, just 100 yards away. They were all standing motionless and quiet, covered by the dark, but definitely facing the cabin.
you shoot a warning
My
shot.
body went into flight mode, and I quickly got up and hurried inside the cabin. I stood behind the door for a minute, collecting my thoughts and debating whether or not to look out the window. Eventually, I gathered the courage to look. Every one of the figures were gone. The forest was empty. This almost made me more terrified than before, but I didn't have much time to think, because only moments later, I heard footsteps approaching the back of the cabin. I think I could distinctly hear 4 or 5 footsteps, but there definitely could have been more. I immediately shut the blinds on the front window. I listened to all these unknown people slowly walk around the cabin. They all stayed grouped up though, like they didn't surround the cabin or anything. At least it didn't sound like it. They walked up to the front, and I held my breath as I heard their boots thump on the wooden porch right outside the door. I genuinely thought this was it for me. I didn't dare try to look out. Disturbingly, whoever this group was outside my cabin, they weren't talking. Like, they made no noise at all aside from their footsteps. Yet they all moved in a coordinated way, like they knew what they were doing. What the hell was a group like this doing out in the middle of nowhere, in the woods? But as I stood there waiting, several minutes passed as I knew they were just standing right on the other side of the door, probably waiting for me to eventually try to leave or something. After 10 minutes
Who's
passed,
leaving?
I finally decided, screw it. I'll try to take a look out the window.
These narrators sound too bored for these stories. I don't know what it is, but it's like a reoccurring thing with these like scary videos, especially they have like commentary or like narrators. They always have to sound so monotone, and it doesn't add to like the scare factor. It just makes it sound kind of, I don't know, like unappealing, I guess.
I quietly walked over and moved just a sliver of the blind, just so I could barely look through with
Thanks,
one
Metal.
eye. The porch was empty. Nobody was out there. The whole group was gone, without ever having made a sound of them leaving. I
Mr.
didn't
Ballin
even
is the
bother
best.
grabbing anything but my car keys, then sprinted out of the cabin and got in my car, leaving those woods. I half expected the group to be waiting along the isolated dirt road. I mean, it was thin, and going through the dark forest at night, they easily could have blocked it off or something. But I was
Could have blocked it off. Unless they have a car, I'm running right through them with my truck. Come on, man.
able to make it out, not seeing anyone else. I don't entirely know what I experienced at the cabin that night. That many people creeping around the forest at night and stalking me at my off-grid cabin, probably draining my generator, but then not doing anything. It just doesn't make any sense. What were they even trying to do? Unfortunately, I don't have any answers, but if anyone thinks they might know who this group was or what they were trying to do, I'm open to hearing some theories. I haven't been back to the cabin since,
How the heck
but
will we know?
considering I own the place, eventually I'll have to go back. Honestly, I'm terrified of what answers I might find.
Why don't you just go back with somebody else? Go back with a group of people. Problem solved. Yeah, these 3 stories were not really that scary, Chad. I gotta say, I never really think these kind of stories are ever like creepy at all. They're just kind of like, all right, well, they're just like okay, you know.